Hello, welcome back to Biology 124. Today we're going to be talking about the evolution of fungi, chapter 19. Now this is kind of a two-part beginning here. We're going to be focusing on just a little bit of fungi in this course, but we don't get into a lot of detail. We're going to be mostly going into plants. Even though they're in different kingdoms, we kind of lumped them together just because we want to introduce fungi to you guys. But we're not going to go into huge detail about it. So, we're going to talk about fungi and their specific symbiotic relationships, their ecological importance, their basic structure, and then we're going to go into 3 different phyla. There are more, but for this class, we're just going to be focusing on those 3. The study of fungus is called mycology. Latin, it's fungus, but in Greek it's the mucus, and so that's where mycology comes from. Now, fungi are in domain Eukarya. They are in kingdom fungi. These general characteristics you need to know. They are eukaryotic, which we know because they're in domain Eukarya. These guys are non-motile, they do not move. And also they are mostly multicellular. They also get their nutrition by what we call absorption, and they're heterotrophic because they get it, they can't make it themselves. So it's heterotrophic by absorption. These guys also undergo either asexual and sexual reproductive life cycles. And during those different life cycles, they produce spores instead of eggs, and that's how they reproduce. Most fungi are free-living, what we call saprotrophic decomposers. Sapro means decay, and as we talked about previously, trophic means like feeding or nutrition, different levels there. So these guys eat decayed organic material. And so they're really important for recycling nutrients back within the system. Without them, everything, all the minerals and vitamins and things that are in the ground or from other living organic material couldn't be used again. So these guys are critical in putting them back into that cycle. So if you look at this, these 2 different charts here, we have the abiotic down here reservoir and the biotic reservoir. Now this is where we get producers and consumers, and when they die, the decomposers will come in and they get to break everything down and it can go back into the food chain. So these guys are critical in being able to bring those abiotic nutrients back into the biotic cycle here. So decomposition connects all trophic levels. So decomposers are huge, and most of them are fungi, or most of the fungi are decomposers. So they're really critical in our environment. Some fungi form symbiotic relationships. So first, let's talk about parasitic relationships. This is where one benefits and one is actually harmed. Now we have things called rusts and smuts over here by these plants. There's some rusts, some smuts. Some people actually can eat the smuts as a delicacy in certain countries. But they look deformed and they're kind of weird for us. Some other parasitic things are cause of Dutch elm disease. That has a huge thing back east when a lot of the trees died because of the fungus. We also have leaf curl and mildew that are come from different fungal diseases. In us, we call these mycosis. So these are the medically important ones. So when you go to the doctor and they talk something blah 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 mycosis, you know it's a fungus disease. Some examples are thrush, yeast, different infections there, ringworm, athlete's foot. Those are all different types of fungi. Mutualisms. So this is when both parties benefit. This is really important, you guys need to know. Lichens are fungi plus a cyanobacteria or some kind of green algae. These guys, what they do, they grow on rocks or soil or on different trees, and they are the ones that produce soil for everything. There's different kinds. You have crustose, which are kind of the crusty looking ones, the fructose, which are shrubby, and you also have the foliose, which is leafy. This guy up here looks kind of like Spanish moss, but it's not. It's beard lichen. So they look very similar, but this is actually a specific type of fungi. Now mycorrhizae. This is called fungus root in plants. Let me move my face. Here's a very zoomed in, scanning electron microscope image here. Now, mycorrhizae are very, very important. What they do is they increase the surface area in plant roots, and that allows the plants to increase their absorption rate. Some plants won't even germinate if there's not some type of mycorrhizae with them. And so it's very, very critical for them to have this. Without it, plants wouldn't be able to absorb all the necessary nutrition that they need. So mycorrhizae and lichens are very important mutualistic relationships in our functioning world. Of course, general economic importance, medicines. We wouldn't have certain antibiotics. I mean, penicillin was our first one, and that came from a fungus. Also, different types of food. Cheese. Who doesn't like cheese? And also, breads, beers, wines. Also, we eat a lot of mushrooms just as delicacies. We have truffles, morels, portobello mushrooms. Just make sure you note that there are very deadly mushrooms out there that can cause problems for you. Okay, so let's talk about the basic structures. Now, hyphae are filaments which make up what we call the mycelium. Now, mycelium is the body of the fungus. So when you look at it and you open it up, it kind of has all this sort of stringy, mushy stuff. So that's the mycelium, which is a whole bunch of hyphae inside. Now, when you look at the hyphae, some of them have what's called a septa, and this divides the hyphae into different sections or cross walls. Cell walls are made of chitin, which is actually more structurally related to us as the animal kingdom than to plants. So fungi are actually evolutionarily more related to us. Spores are the reproductive cell that grows a new organism, and it's dispersed by the wind. Now, these can be produced by the result of asexual or sexual reproduction. Now, yeast. Yeast is actually unicellular. It's round and it doesn't have any hyphae. And it's reproduced by asexual budding. So this picture down here, if you've ever made bread or anything that uses yeast, they just like little balls. When they reproduce, this is what it looks like. They have this little bud right here. I lost my mouse right here. Left is a bud right here, and they create another one. So they're like little clones, kind of. So down here is a question I want to propose to you guys. If a single fungus can produce billions of spores, why aren't fungus everywhere? Or are they? Think about it. What do you think fungus need to grow? Do they need sunlight? No, they're not autotrophic. In fact, most of them require kind of warm, dark areas and the moisture. And so we do find fungus spores pretty much everywhere. But they don't always take root, but they're fungus, so they don't have real roots. They don't always start to grow because you have to have just the right conditions. But the spores are everywhere. Just the actual fruiting bodies may not be producing. Okay, so here's a structure right here is the reproductive body. So this is where you're going to find where the spores are being produced. You have the hyphae in here. It looks like that stringy kind of stuff. And the septum is the divisions in between those hyphae. Now this mycelium is this whole kind of, just everything combined is called the mycelium. Now if you look closer here, you can see the hyphae and some of the septa are coming in right there. And then here's just what another one can look like as well, with the hyphae kind of branching out. Okay, so there are three basic groups. We're going to omit aquatic fungi, which is the chytrids. These guys are mostly unicellular, and they do have a motility phase. If you are familiar with a lot of amphibians and their diseases, a lot of them come from the chytrids, and there's been some issues with amphibians dying off because this fungus is in the water and it's killing them all. But we're going to be focusing on these three: Zygomycota, Ascomycota, and Basidiomycota. Now, zygo comes from zygote, which means yolk, or the egg, right? And so it has kind of this body that will open up and look like an egg. We'll show you a picture in a minute. Asco means sac fungi, and basidio means what we call it club fungi, because basidio means pedestal. Now, they came up with this chair or whatever, and it's called a club chair, and I think that's where they got it from. But just remember, zygote, sac, and club. You need to know the zygomycota, ascomycota, and basidiomycota. All right. These guys are grouped how they are because of their different life cycles, and their structures are actually different, specifically in the sexual part of the life cycle. And we also compare these by their different molecular data. So here's just kind of a summary of what they look like here. Here's the chytrid, which you don't need to know much about. The zygospores, this is what they look like. Kind of has that egg kind of coming out here, that yolk. Here's what the sac fungus are, the Iascomycota, and the Basidiomycota have this club or kind of hat, is how I kind of think of it. And so we look here, and this is why we're focusing on these three groups, because they're actually more related to each other. And so just to keep things simple and to help you guys understand the basics of fungi, that's why we're talking about those three groups, even though there are more. So just to refresh, septa is the hyphae that have the dividers between the cells. So right here, you can see that there's the different nuclei, the cell wall, and these little discs in here. That's the divider of the septa. Some do not have the septa in their hyphae, so just to be aware of that. Now looking over here, just to kind of sum things up, everything you really need to know for this about fungi. So you have the different phylum, you have the zygomycota, ascomycota, and basidiomycota. Then you have the sexual reproductive structures here. Now these structures are the ones that are going to produce those spores. The sexual reproductive structures. Sexual reproductive structures. These are the ones that are going to be actually producing those spores. So in the zygomycota is called a zygospore. In the ascomycota, there's actually two. You have the asci, and you have some that don't actually have that. With the basidiomycota, you have basidia. So pretty easy. It's just the same kind of first part of their name. Now the septa. The zygomycota do not have that septa, so they have this kind of continuous hyphae thing going on down here. But the other two phyla, the ascomycota and the basidiomycota, do have the septa. Now, some examples you need to probably know is the zygomycota. The common one is the black bread molds that you find. The ascomycota, sac fungi, and perfect fungi. I just want you guys to kind of know what those are. You can look those up, just see pictures. Just know that those are the two ones that you need to know for examples. And the basidiomycota, just the club fungi, and anything that kind of has that hat type structure. Okay, so let's get a little bit more detail here. So phylum zygomycota, black bread molds. They're also called rhizopus, is their more formal name. So the aseptae hyphae, they form that one long cell, and they have many, many nuclei going on here. So looking at this picture, right here it's called a stolon, but it's the hyphae. So this is continuous. It has tons of nuclei going on, passing information, but it doesn't have the dividers. Now these guys live off of dead organic materials under the recyclers. So most of them are just living out in the environment, doing their own thing. However, there are some that can be parasitic, but we won't go into detail about that. So most of these guys are saprotrophs that just live out on their own, eating off of dead organic material. Phylum Ascomycota, also known as the sac fungi. Remember, this is a cup fungi in yeast, like the picture of the spoon over here. The little balls right there. This phylum accounts for 75% of all fungi. So most of the fungi you are familiar with comes from this phylum. The two major groups have sexual Ascomycota, which is like baking and brewing yeast, morels and truffles, and then there are some that are parasitic to plants. Some of these would be the Dutch elm disease, like this picture here. Here's leaf curl, and this is ergot, which is from rye and can affect a whole bunch of different types of grains and causes tons and tons of damage. Asexual Ascomycota is the sexual life cycle that has not been demonstrated yet. Okay, so we have fungi imperfecti, which contains the medically important fungi. We also have different examples of mycosis. Anything ranges from the skin, deeper tissue, different infections of the body. You have tenace, which is the cutaneous or dermatophytes right here. It's like ringworm, athlete's foot, jock itch, anything like that in the superficial area. You also have aspergillosis, which is swimmer's ear, lung infections. Here's a picture going on here. We have the fungal growth going on with these nodules. And then you have different things like thrush and vaginitis, yeast infection essentially. And so those are the asexual Astomycota that go on. Phylobasidiomycota, these are the club fungi. So when you think of mushrooms, it's this group. Toadstools, puffballs, shelf fungi. These guys have that cap. Okay, so that's how you remember who they are. A lot of these are also responsible for rust and smuts. Okay, they parasitize the cereal crops. A lot of these are the delicacies like portobello and shiitake, and even some are poisonous. So here's like the puffballs right here, and down here this is called earth star. You have different shelf fungi and portobello and all these different things going on here. Now I want you to remember that toadstools only help Mario. So in this group, if you have anything with a red body and white speckles, it will kill you. So don't eat the toadstools. So I hope this has been helpful for you guys. And if you need anything else, just let me know.